You wake up and before you even open your eyes, a heavy silence wraps around you. It's not just tiredness. It's something deeper, like your body is a shell and your mind is sinking under invisible weight. The clock says 7 a.m. You should get up. You should do the things. But your limbs feel like concrete and your heart whispers, "What's the point?" You scroll your phone. Another perfect morning routine. Another six-figure entrepreneur telling you discipline is all you need. Another person who seems to have figured it out while you're stuck in the same fog. So you think, maybe I'm just lazy, maybe I'm broken. But what if you're not? What if what you're calling laziness is actually something much more human, much more sacred, and far more painful? What if it's grief, not over someone else, but over the life you never got to live? No one taught us to mourn lost versions of ourselves. The child who dreamed without fear. The teenager who believed life had magic. The 20-something who thought this decade would be the one where it all made sense. Instead, we learn to mute that ache with productivity, with caffeine, with mindless scrolling and hollow achievements. And when the distractions stop working, we don't know what to do with the silence. So we call it laziness. But laziness doesn't come with this kind of sorrow. Laziness doesn't feel like mourning, because that's what this is, unspoken mourning. You are grieving the opportunities you didn't take, the parts of yourself you had to abandon to be accepted, the days you lived for others instead of yourself. And grief has its own timeline. It moves in stillness, it speaks in silence, and it looks from the outside like doing nothing. But inside, it's a quiet war. You're not broken, you're not weak. You're carrying 1,000 untold stories that never got to breathe. And until you honor that pain, no amount of to-do lists will bring you back to life. What you need is not a motivational speech. You need space to name what was lost, because only then can you begin to return to yourself. And in that return lies something extraordinary. We'll talk about how everything you've called self-sabotage is actually the body's attempt to protect you, and why your survival mechanisms might be the reason you feel so numb today. You've probably heard the phrase, "You're not lazy, you're grieving." But grieving what exactly? Not a person, not a single event. You're grieving potential, a version of your life that never had the space to exist. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most people carry this grief without ever realizing it. They call it burnout. They call it lack of motivation. They call it being stuck. But at its core, it's grief for a self that was never allowed to breathe. And grief, when unacknowledged, doesn't disappear, it calcifies. It settles into your bones and dulls your senses. You lose the ability to dream, not because you don't care anymore, but because every time you tried, it hurt too much to see nothing change. Let's get honest for a moment. How many times have you tried to turn things around? Not with empty intentions, but with genuine effort. Maybe you built a routine, started a new project, told yourself this time would be different. And for a while it was. You felt the flicker of life returning. But then, without warning, you crashed. Not because you were weak, not because you lacked discipline, but because you were running on hope that had never been met with healing. Trying to move forward without processing what was lost is like building a home on a foundation that's cracked. Eventually, it crumbles, and the worst part is, when it does, you blame yourself. Again. So let's name it. Grief isn't always loud. It doesn't always show up as sobbing or silence. Sometimes it shows up as numb scrolling at midnight, as skipped workouts, as meals you don't remember eating, as "I just need to rest" that turns into days of disconnection. You grieve when you think of who you could have become if circumstances had been different, if someone had supported you, if the trauma hadn't hit so hard, if you hadn't been so alone. That grief lingers in the background of every decision you make. It whispers that maybe it's too late, that maybe the window has already closed. But let me ask you something. Too late for what? Who told you there was a deadline on becoming yourself? This is where most self-help content gets it wrong. It jumps straight to action. It says, fix your habits, optimize your schedule, become 1% better every day. But healing isn't a spreadsheet, it's not linear. You can't plan your way out of pain you haven't even acknowledged. Before you rebuild, you need to grieve. And grieving doesn't mean wallowing, it means honoring. It means saying, yes, I wish things had been different. I wish I had been seen, supported, loved in the way I needed. I wish I had gotten to try before the world told me to shrink. That acknowledgement isn't weakness, it's truth. And truth, as painful as it can be, is the only thing strong enough to carry you into the next chapter. You've spent years calling it self-sabotage. Those days where you ghost your own potential. The moments when you finally get a glimpse of hope, maybe a new job, a fresh idea, a sense that you're ready to change, and then somehow you pull away. You forget to answer the email. You procrastinate for just a bit too long. You talk yourself out of applying. And then you spiral, believing you've ruined your life again. But what if that pattern, what you've called failure, avoidance, resistance, isn't a flaw? What if it's a shield? Human behavior is rarely random. Behind every bad habit lies a reason, a logic built not in adulthood but in childhood. You learned early on what parts of you were safe to show, what dreams were okay to have, and what forms of ambition made people uncomfortable. Somewhere along the line, you may have been taught, directly or indirectly, that becoming your fullest self was dangerous. That being seen meant being hurt. That success led to more pressure, more exposure, more chances to be rejected. And so you created survival systems, not consciously. They were built in the background like silent code. Pull back when too much attention is on you. Stay quiet when excitement stirs. Don't follow through, because if you never try fully, you'll never fail completely. And now you're stuck in that loop, trying to evolve with a nervous system still coded for retreat. As psychoanalyst Carl Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That's what's been happening. You've been trying to move forward with invisible weights tied to your ankles. Every time you take a step toward expansion, those old protections pull you back. Not because you're lazy or broken, but because some part of you still believes it's not safe to bloom. Think about it. Every major change in your life, every moment where you started to rise probably came with discomfort, fear, maybe even guilt. Did you ever feel selfish for wanting more? Did you ever feel like success would make you unlovable? That if you really committed, you'd lose your relationships, your comfort, your sense of self? These aren't irrational fears. They're trauma echoes. And the body holds on to what the mind tries to forget. Your self-sabotage might actually be self-protection in disguise. The parts of you that pull away, shut down, or distract, they aren't trying to destroy your life. They're trying to preserve your safety. But here's the problem. The life you want lives on the other side of that protective wall. And you can't reach it until you begin to work with, not against, your inner defense system. Start by noticing when resistance shows up. Don't judge it. Don't fight it. Get curious. What am I afraid will happen if I actually follow through? What's the worst thing that could occur if I allow myself to be seen, to succeed, to be proud? The answers might surprise you. Maybe deep down you're afraid of being judged. Maybe you fear outgrowing the people you love. Maybe you worry that if you try your best and still fail, there will be nothing left to hope for. These are not shallow thoughts. They are deep, emotional undercurrents that influence everything you do. In the words of philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. That fear you feel when stepping into something bigger than your current life. It's not a warning that something's wrong. It's a sign you're expanding, and your nervous system is simply trying to catch up. Some will argue that looking back is useless, that the past should stay in the past, but that's not how the psyche works. Unprocessed pain doesn't disappear with time. It disguises itself as personality, as bad habits, as just how I am. If you don't grieve the life you never lived, it will continue to haunt the one you're trying to create. You'll sabotage every good thing because deep down, you don't feel worthy of it. You'll reject opportunities because some part of you is still mourning the fact that no one opened doors for you when it mattered most. This grief will dress itself up as perfectionism, procrastination, emotional numbness. It's not just about sadness. It's about interrupted development. You never got to build fully because you were too busy surviving. The work then is not to pretend none of it happened. The work is to sit with your story long enough to see the pattern, and then decide with conscious clarity that you're ready to begin again. Not from scratch, but from wisdom. Because here's the paradox. The life you long for isn't built on avoiding the past. It's built on integrating it. You don't need to become someone else. You need to become the version of yourself that was buried under years of neglect, shame, and silence. And yes, this hurts. Transformation always does. But pain that is named can be pain that is released. And in that release there is space. Space to redefine what success means to you. Space to try again without the weight of I should have been further by now. Space to set boundaries, to prioritize your nervous system, to build slowly and deliberately, not out of panic but out of care. You get to choose a new way forward, but only after you mourn the one that never came. One of the most powerful tools for this process is self-compassion, not the fluffy kind, the kind that says, I forgive myself for what I didn't know. I forgive myself for how I coped. I forgive myself for who I had to become just to survive. And I choose to keep going, not because I feel ready, but because I deserve a life that reflects who I truly am, not just who I had to be. When Carl Rogers said, "The curious paradox is that when I accept myself just as I am, then I can change," he was speaking to this exact moment. Change begins not with war, but with witness. When you see yourself clearly, all of yourself, the grief included, you no longer need to perform your healing. You begin to live it. So here you are. Not broken, not lazy, not behind, just someone who's finally stopped running from their own story. You've named the grief. You've felt the weight of unlived years. And now, in the quiet aftermath of that honesty, there's space. Not the loud, flashy kind of space filled with to-do lists and pressure to reinvent yourself overnight, but a softer kind. The kind of space where something new can breathe. Because now that you've honored what was lost, you're ready to protect what could be born. And that begins not with another sprint, but with a gentle return to yourself. This is the part where most people expect fireworks, a big change, a loud decision, a dramatic pivot. But real healing is quieter. It's in the small rituals, waking up and making your bed not because you're fixing your life, but because you've decided that you're worth showing up for. It's in saying no to what drains you, even if it means disappointing people who benefited from your self-abandonment. It's in noticing when your inner critic starts shouting again, and choosing not to believe every word. This is where discipline becomes devotion. Not punishment, not perfectionism, but a daily act of self-respect. You begin to reclaim your dreams in fragments. Maybe it starts with a walk, a journal entry, a phone call you've been avoiding. Maybe it means changing your environment or finally asking for help. And some days it won't feel like progress at all. That's okay. Growth isn't linear. Some of the most powerful days are the ones where you don't fall back into old patterns, where you pause, where you breathe through the urge to give up and simply stay with yourself instead. That's resilience. That's proof you're already changing. Remember this: your worth isn't something you have to earn by becoming productive, healed, or impressive. It was never gone. It was only buried beneath the debris of survival, and now slowly you're digging it out, one moment of truth at a time. The life you're building isn't about becoming someone new, it's about coming home to who you've always been, underneath the noise, the grief, the fear. That version of you still exists, and they've been waiting patiently for you to return. So take the next step, not because you have to prove anything, but because you're done abandoning yourself. The grief you carry is real, but so is your capacity to begin again. Let that be your starting point. Let that be enough. And if you ever forget, come back to this: you are not lazy, you are healing. And healing is not weakness. It's the bravest thing you will ever do.